Hey guys, Redcranke from Death Curse Society here for you. American Horror Story premiered Wednesday night, so we've got a new special feature for you. It's the Slash Report. That's right. American Horror Story 1984 opened with a bang on FX and delivers on its promise to introduce a much anticipated slasher-style storyline into their anthology series. 1984 actually begins in 1970 when the seemingly innocent Camp Redwood is in its heyday. Campers are sleeping and counselors are canoodling. What first looks like some hot girl-on-girl action gets interrupted by some guy bringing in a lambskin rubber he stole from his dad's nightstand to get freaky. One girl seems to be a bit reticent at first as the unnamed couple begins shedding their clothes. Finally, the nervous one seems to be ready to swing.
Let's go, Chex! Let's swing!
And takes her shirt off as the killer strikes, stabbing a long knife through the kissing mouths of the other couple. Afterwards, we see a cabin strewn with 10 bloody bodies as a killer, donning a black slicker reminiscent of I Know What You Did Last Summer, leaves the scene of the crime, but not before he gathers trophies from his victims, one of their ears. The killer, as we discover later, is Benjamin Richter, known as Mr. Jingles, presumably because of the large key ring hanging from his belt, and not a reference to the cute little mouse in the Green Mile.
He's smart, Mr. Jingles.
Mr. Jingles.
That his name, he was put in my ear.
More on Mr. Jingles later. We flash ahead to 1984 after the blood-soaked, era-influenced opening credits and meet the majority of the core cast. Emma Roberts plays Brooke Thompson, the shy new girl in LA who has no friends. While trying not to drool all over the exercise mat while watching Chet, played by Gus Kenworthy, Brooke gets the attention of Montana, played by Billie Lourd, who introduces herself quite boldly, but not in a lazy way, in the showers afterwards. Through this awkward introduction, Brooke meets Xavier, played by Cody Fern, Ray, played by Deron Horton, and the drool-worthy Chet. Xavier is discussing a recent murder in his neighborhood that is attributed to the Night Stalker, a true-life serial killer from the time. Brooke makes an unusual reference to serial killer habits, which makes her one of those girls. Alright. Xavier is an aspiring actor who has taken a summer job as a counselor at the soon-to-be reopened Camp Redwood and invites his friends, including new girl Brooke, to join him, saying it will be safer than staying in a city with a confirmed serial killer. The friends part and go their separate ways, leading us to the solitary home life of Brooke, who seems to have secrets of her own without telegraphing them for the television audience. Why did she recently move to LA all alone? Question for later. As she lays sleeping, she is attacked by the Night Stalker himself, Richard Ramirez, played by Zach Villa, but is able to fend him off with a handy frying pan strike to his head. He runs away as neighbors begin knocking on her door, threatening that he'll find her again, claiming Satan will show him the way. The next morning, she's in the van on the way to Camp Redwood, retelling her story as the others smoke weed, drink booze, and snort coke. We find out Chet was eliminated from some Olympic team for drug use. At a casual stop for gas, Ed, a full-service attendant, tops off their tank while Xavier uses a payphone to check his answering machine at home. A foreboding male voice tells him, "You can't just take your dick and walk away," which doesn't seem like a pleasant future conversation for Xavier. By the way, for those who aren't old enough to remember the 80s, yes, some gas stations actually had employees that pumped your gas, cleaned your windshield, and even checked your oil if requested. Also, there were phones on virtually every corner before you had one in your pocket. Those required a quarter to use, and then we had machines connected to your home phone that recorded messages similar to voicemail on small cassette tapes. Yeah, enough of the history lesson though. Let's move on. The attendant hears them mention Camp Redwood and warns them, Crazy Ralph style, to stay away.
I'm a messenger of God. You're doomed if you stay here.
As usual, they ignore the warnings and continue. Back on the road, the most responsible people in the world smash into a guy while lighting up a bong in the front seat. Again, reminiscent of I Know What You Did Last Summer. The man passes out on the side of the road after claiming he can't remember much and muttering, "Believe me, I tried." The group, led by Xavier, who was driving, say they need to get their story straight, and decide to load him in the van and take him to the camp for medical attention. Once they arrive, the entire group, except Brooke, forgets about the injured stranger when they meet the owner, Margaret Booth, played by Leslie Grossman. They carry on a short conversation about trivial things when Brooke finally speaks up from inside the van asking for a medic. Way to show off your responsibility skills there, counselors. Rita, the on-site nurse played by Angelica Ross, checks on the stranger and attributes his condition to dehydration, possibly from hiking and getting lost in the woods. And by the way, we find out later she really didn't do a too thorough examination. During a tour of the campgrounds, Margaret introduces the counselors to Chef Birdie, played by Tara Carsian. She makes some witty remarks and comebacks, setting up her character as the longtime resident of Camp Redwood who's seen it all. Eventually, we encircle a campfire for some story time. Rita tells them the tale of the Camp Redwood massacre, including some backstory from Mr. Jingles, a two-tour Vietnam vet who actually enjoyed killing so much he fashioned a necklace out of the ears of his wartime victims and was dishonorably discharged. The only job he could find upon returning to the States was as a janitor at Camp Redwood, where he continued his killing rampage. Rita screws up the story, though, when she says 10 victims in all. Margaret appears from the darkness to correct the story, saying only 9 died, not 10, and reveals a large scar where her left ear used to be. She reveals she was the lone survivor of the Camp Redwood massacre, but claims to have found Jesus during the experience, which remains a driving force of her trying to reopen the camp to spiritually enrich the youth of America one summer at a time. She's one righteous bitch. After story time is over, we jump to the infirmary where the stranger suddenly wakes up and discovers his left ear too is missing. This is about the time Brooke decides to check in on the hiker, who tells her the phone lines are down and warns her to leave once he finds out they are at Camp Redwood. We also meet one more character, Trevor, played by Matthew Morrison, the activities director, a man who doesn't enforce the rules very much, and also a man who is packing a lot of heat in those tiny shorts. This gets the attention of Montana, who immediately decides to go skinny dipping and lures Trevor in for some steamy action. While Trevor is showing off his impressive skill of holding his breath underwater, if you know what I mean.
Aye, know what I mean, know what I mean, say no more.
Montana notices a pair of headlights near the shoreline of the lake and some lightning in the distance. An out-of-breath Trevor emerges from the water and they decide to find shelter from the storm. We depart the camp visiting a mental asylum where we meet Dr. Hopple, played by Orla Brady, and Art, the asylum administrator, played by Mitch Pileggi. Hopple arrives discovering many of the inmates wandering loose on the ground, similar to Michael Myers' escape in Halloween. We also learn that 3 hours earlier, Mr. Jingles, finally shown as the incredible John Carroll Lynch, escaped by faking a suicide by hanging, killed at least one orderly, and hit the master release switch, freeing all the other inmates. While examining Mr. Jingles' empty cell, Dr. Hopple discovers a newspaper clipping detailing Camp Redwood's revival. I guess this is what sparked Mr. Jingles' escape? Why does he hate this particular camp so much? It's not like he drowned as a little boy or anything and lived in the wood. Wait, wrong story. Also on his way to camp, Mr. Jingles kills Ed, the gas station attendant, in a scene possibly inspired by Christine. Already, Mr. Jingles appears to have reclaimed his signature outfit, the black rain slicker, which seems pretty quick to me. Where do these horror characters do their shopping when they escape prison or a mental hospital? Maybe he's an Amazon Prime member and got that 2-day shipping on point. I don't know. Back at camp, Chet shows his angry side during a playful argument while the others watch the Olympics opening ceremony, and injures Ray by throwing a crushed beer can at him, slicing his hand open. The naturally caring Brooke offers to help Ray by looking for bandages in the infirmary. There she discovers the body of the hiker stuck to a door and sees a glimpse of Mr. Jingles through a window. He chases her through the woods and back to the cabin with the others. Brooke goes through all the typical stumbling and falling that most potential horror victims participate in, but somehow makes it back to safety. No one seems to believe her story at first, thinking she's just spooked by the assault she experienced before they left, especially since, once they all go to the infirmary, they find no dead body. Back at her cabin, Brooke wakes in the middle of the night, hearing the payphone ringing, which is odd if the lines are down, as the hiker suggested earlier. She goes to the payphone, and all you hear is keys jingling. The episode ends abruptly as Richard Ramirez steps from the shadows of the woods. It seems like Satan had good directions and in fact did show him the way. Overall, I love this episode. I can't really think of a better way to start this season, which is supposed to be a love letter of sorts to the slasher genre. American Horror Story nails it with the premiere. The characters are likable, cookie-cutter representations of some of the cliché characters of classic horror films, which is fine by me. I'm looking forward to how the American Horror Story writers will put their own trademark twist on these characters in future episodes. Many returning actors are getting a chance to show different sides of themselves by switching up their typical typecast normal roles. For instance, Emma Roberts is playing a timid, shy, but resourceful Brooke, while in the past portraying a bitchy, powerful witch. Billy Lord does the same thing, but reversing those roles, going from a timid, novice witch to the quick-witted, sarcastic, and horny Montana. I think this is going to be one of my favorite parts of 1984, watching these characters change from past seasons and how well the actors handle it. As much as the writers are shoving Brooke in your face as the consummate final girl, and Emma Roberts is playing it to perfection, I halfway expect her not to make it all the way through the season. And maybe one of those famous AHS twists to watch for down the road. One concern I have is the pacing of the season. This episode was packed with scares, gore, and action, which I enjoyed. I'm not sure how the writers are going to keep this pace up for 10 episodes though, and I'm not looking forward to whatever happens in the next few episodes to slow that action down. I only hope they don't have a bunch of full episodes that are flashbacks. The jumpy timelines of American Horror Story and even other shows like The Walking Dead are starting to irritate me. I like a story with a beginning, middle, and an end. You don't have to dress it up so much with a lot of flashbacks and time jumps. The AHS team absolutely nails the 80s, which is great. As much as Stranger Things gets it right as well, 1984 felt more like home for me, as an 80s baby who grew up on horror movies. From the costumes, to the hairstyles, to the limited technology, and even the gel pens, it was superb. Sorry, I'm a writer. I notice things like pens. There are tons of Easter eggs strewn throughout the premiere episode as well, from throwbacks to Halloween, of course, Friday the 13th, and all kinds of stuff you will see. That's something I'm really looking forward to as well. Lastly, I want to talk about the music. Along with the original score that sounds right out of a straight-to-video horror release from the era, the popular songs used for each scene were perfection, especially Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell, and featuring Michael Jackson, for those who like a little trivia. Many of the songs from just this episode alone are the soundtrack of my younger days, and it was a nice piece of nostalgia, used well. In conclusion, I can't wait for the next episode and the rest of the season. This was one of the better premiere episodes of American Horror Story, in my opinion, and it really set the stage for what could be a tremendous season. Remember a few years back when Sean Cunningham and others were talking about making a Friday the 13th series, but couldn't figure out how to do it? Well, it looks like Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk were able to do that. 1984 is an engaging love letter to Jason, Michael, and many of the other slashers of cinematic history. What did you think of the premiere, and are you excited for episode 2? Let me know in the comments below, and let's speculate together. That brings us to the end of the first Slash Report on American Horror Story's premiere episode. Stay tuned next week for our next edition of this. And always, thanks for watching. DCS out! Woo!